I'm Stephanie, 31, and my daughter Grace means everything to me. She's 12, bright-eyed, full of heart, and the gentlest soul I've ever known. My relationship with my parents, Harold and Martha, and my brother Jason, that's where things get messy. When I left Grace with them for a weekend conference, my gut twisted with unease. I never imagined that just 3 days later, I'd be sitting in a hospital room, watching my daughter recover from emergency surgery after breaking her leg in injury my family forced her to walk on for 3 hours. We didn't have time. For the they told me. Before I go any further, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe to hear how I dealt with a betrayal I'll never forget. Being a single mom isn't easy, but Grace and I have built our own rhythm. After my divorce from Mark 5 years ago, I dedicated myself to giving her stability and love. Mark's job had taken him across the country. He sends child support, sure, but his visits are few and far between. Grace gets it, she's always been wise beyond her years, but I've had to double up, becoming both mom and dad. My relationship with my own parents? Always tense. Harold and Martha Wilson live in a picture-perfect lakeside home, about 2 hours from our apartment in the city. It's a postcard, a cozy wooden cabin, a private dock, forest trails. Grace loves it there. But beneath that Norman Rockwell charm lies a chillier truth. I was never enough for them. Harold, a retired surgeon, demanded perfection. Martha, once a strict school principal, analyzed everything I did. Their critiques were nonstop. My A's weren't enough. My wardrobe? Too laid back. My career choice, teaching instead of medicine? Disappointing. Even now, at 31, with a master's degree and a secure job as a high school English teacher, I still feel like that teenager, never quite measuring up. And then there's Jason, my younger brother by 3 years, yet somehow always above fault. The golden boy, the prodigy. He walked in Dad's footsteps straight into medicine, and in my parents' eyes could do no wrong. When he became an orthopedic surgeon like Dad, you'd think he'd discovered a cure for cancer, the way they celebrated. Still, I kept in touch for Grace's sake. She deserved to know her grandparents and uncle. They adored her, in their own way. Grace loved fishing with Grandpa, baking with Grandma, and listening to Uncle Jason's dramatic hospital stories. I did my best to shield her from their passive-aggressive jabs, the same ones that chipped away at me all my life. And mostly, I succeeded. So when my principal selected me to attend an educational conference in Chicago, a potential stepping stone toward the department head role I'd been eyeing, I hesitantly arranged for Grace to stay with my parents for the weekend. It's only 3 days, Mom, Grace said, tucking her favorite books into her bag. At 12, she was in that magical in-between, still my little girl, but blooming into her own person. Her dark hair was tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail, her blue eyes sparkling with anticipation. I'll be fine. Grandpa said we might hike to the waterfall. I checked her suitcase and added an extra sweater. April in Minnesota can surprise you. I know you'll be great, sweetie. Just remember your allergy meds every morning, and don't let Grandpa sneak you too much sugar before bed. I know, Mom, she groaned, rolling her eyes playfully. We've done this before. We had but never more than a day. Something about this time felt different. Maybe it was how important the conference was. Or maybe it was Jason. At the last minute, he'd decided to stay at our parents' house too. He and his wife Megan were having issues, and he needed space to clear his head.
His presence always changed things, made my parents colder.
Dismissive, that Friday I drove Grace out to the lake house. Spring was just starting to bloom, trees budding, the lake glinting between the woods, the A-frame cabin my dad built before I was born standing proud. My parents were on the porch. Martha immediately criticized Grace's jacket. That's far too light for the forecast, she scolded, whisking her inside. I've laid out some proper clothes for the weekend. I held back a sigh. Grace gave me a quick look that said, "It's fine, I've got this." Harold barely looked at me, too busy talking to Grace about the hiking trail he had planned. The waterfall is stunning this time of year. With the snow melt, the path will be slippery. You'll need real shoes, not those flimsy sneakers. I packed her hiking boots, Dad. I said, putting Grace's suitcase in the guest room. They're the ones you and Mom gave her for Christmas, he nodded, distracted. Jason's bringing steaks tomorrow. He'll be here around noon. Of course, Jason's arrival was always the main event. Before I left, I pulled Mom aside in the kitchen. Grace sometimes gets homesick at night. If she needs to call even late, please, let her. Martha waved it off. Stephanie, we've raised kids before. Successfully, I might add. Her tone carried a sting. The unspoken message? I hadn't. She'd be fine. We don't coddle her like you do. I swallowed the retort. She's also been having some knee pain from soccer. There's ibuprofen in her toiletry bag. Harold was a surgeon for 35 years. Jason is a doctor. I think we can handle a sore knee. Her voice was firm. Final. Jason arrived just as I was heading out. He barely acknowledged me before scooping Grace into a dramatic hug. There's my favorite niece. Ready for a weekend of fun with the cool uncle? Grace laughed. I forced a smile. Jason had always been good with her, over the top, but she loved it. His gifts were extravagant, his stories theatrical, his attention a performance. But to Grace it was magic. Drive safe, Steph, he said casually as I hugged Grace goodbye. Be good, sweetie. Call me tonight before bed, okay? I whispered, squeezing her hand. I love you more than anything. Love you too, Mom. Don't worry so much, your conference is gonna be awesome. As I drove away, I caught one last look at her in my rearview mirror smiling. Waving from between my cold-faced parents and smug-faced brother, that image would stay with me forever. My radiant, trusting daughter surrounded by the very three people who would betray her in the most unimaginable way. The Chicago event kicked off smoothly. My lecture on creative literacy strategies for diverse classrooms was set for Saturday afternoon, while Friday's introductory speeches offered great chances for networking. Even so, I found myself constantly checking my phone, smiling at Grace's sweet updates, Grandma's banana pancakes, a woodpecker sighting by the lake. Friday night, as promised, I made my call. But no one picked up. I dialed again 3 times over 2 hours. My worry grew steadily. Finally, at 9:30 p.m., my dad returned the call. Grace is sleeping already, he said sharply. Busy day prepping the boat for the season, she's worn out. Could you wake her up? I told her I'd say goodnight. Stephanie. Don't be absurd. The child needs sleep, not interruptions, because you're having separation anxiety. I bit back my irritation. Then can she just call me first thing in the morning? We're hiking early, she call when we're back. He disconnected before I could respond. Classic Harold, always assuming command, always deciding what's best for everyone. I tried texting Grace directly, but it didn't deliver. I chalked it up to the lake house's weak cell signal and forced myself to focus on preparing for my talk. What I couldn't know, what Grace would later sob through in a hospital room, was what unfolded Saturday. According to her, the day started well. Jason showed up before breakfast, grinning and armed with donuts, overflowing with his usual exaggerated excitement for the hike. Dad had mapped out a demanding trail, a 7-mile loop from the house to the waterfall and back. Grace was eager but hesitant about the length. Maybe we could do the shorter trail, she'd suggested shyly. Mom and I usually hike the 3-mile one. You're not a baby, my dad said. Time for a real hike. Besides, Jason wants to see the upper falls. And that was that. Grace's comfort or opinion didn't matter. Jason's wishes did. That was always the rule in our family. They departed at 9 a.m. Grace wore her proper hiking boots, jeans, and layers for the shifting spring weather. Her backpack held snacks, water, and her phone until my mom took it away. No screens in nature, Martha declared. This is family time. The first leg of the hike was fine. They reached the waterfall by noon, ate sandwiches Martha packed, and enjoyed the swollen falls crashing over mossy rocks, but the return trip turned disastrous. A mile into the way back, the path narrowed by the creek, becoming slick and uneven from the spray. Grace walked carefully, but my dad and Jason hurried ahead with Martha close behind. No one saw her slip. She stepped on moss, lost balance, and landed hard. Her leg twisted and a horrible crack echoed. The pain hit instantly. She screamed. Her family rushed over Grace, curled in agony, clutching her leg, sobbing.
It's
Broken, she gasped. I heard it snap. Jason examined her, his skills finally useful. The leg was swelling fast. Looks like a tibia fracture, he said. She needs For a second, Grace felt hope. Jason was a doctor. He'd take care of her. They'd call her mom. All would be okay. Then Dad looked at his watch. Dinner with the Hendersons is at 7, he reminded everyone. We won't make it there and to the hospital. Can't we cancel? Grace asked, crying. It really hurts. Martha pressed her lips together. They're your grandfather's oldest friends. This has been planned for months. Grace looked at Jason, begging him with her eyes. He shrugged. It's probably just a small fracture. No big deal. Let's ice it and see. But how can I walk? She whispered, lightheaded. I can't. Their solution makes my blood boil to this day. Dad broke a branch to use as a walking stick. Jason claimed walking it off might help saying weight-bearing heals faster. Martha rolled her eyes. We don't have time for theatrics. No one called for help. No one carried her. Instead, they forced my 12-year-old to walk 3 agonizing hours back on a broken leg. Grace said the pain was unbearable. She cried until she physically couldn't anymore, then walked in silence. She begged for her phone. They said no. She asked to stop. They only allowed quick rests, urging her to keep up for the precious. Dinner. By the time they got back, Grace's leg was horrifically swollen, black and blue from thigh to ankle. She couldn't stand at all. Only then did Jason and Dad support her the last stretch home. At the house, they gave her ice, pain meds, and put her leg on some pillows. Martha handed her soup and crackers, then left her alone. We'll only be gone a few hours, she said. Water's by the bed. There's the remote. Try to rest. Grace, in blinding pain, watched them leave, every last one of them. Alone, in a house 2 miles from anyone. With a shattered leg, she tried using the landline, but it was dead. A tree had knocked it out the week before. My family never mentioned that. No cell, no phone, no way to reach me. So Grace lay there, drifting between sobbing agony and sleep brought on by pain and exhaustion. Meanwhile, I was still in Chicago, calling, texting, pacing, spiraling. By Sunday morning, I was in full panic. No response. No contact. Nothing since Friday. I had messaged my parents, Jason, even tried nearby neighbors. The last conference panel wasn't until 2 p.m. But by 9 a.m., I couldn't wait. I told the staff I had a family crisis, packed up and got on the highway. 3 hours of white-knuckled driving. My mind conjured every possibility from dead phones to actual emergencies. When I turned onto my parents' gravel drive, my hands were shaking. All 3 cars were their Dad's SUV, Mom's sedan, Jason's flashy convertible. At least they were home. I pulled up slowly, tires crunching the gravel. No one came out to meet me. I stepped inside without bothering to knock. It had once been my home too. What I saw in the living room felt surreal, completely ordinary. My parents and Jason were casually playing Scrabble at the coffee table, with mugs of coffee and sundae pastries placed perfectly nearby. All 3 looked up, clearly surprised. Stephanie, we weren't expecting you until tonight, my mother said, her voice laced with subtle criticism, as if I'd breached some unspoken rule by arriving early. I've been calling for nearly 2 days, I said, doing my best to keep my voice steady. Where's Grace? Still asleep, Jason replied offhandedly. She's fine, just resting after a small spill on the trail yesterday. The way he said it, a small spill, made every alarm in my mind go off. What spill? What exactly happened? My father exhaled heavily and placed his tiles down. She slipped on wet rocks and hurt her leg. It's nothing major, we've been monitoring it. If it wasn't major, why didn't anyone call? Me? Why hasn't Grace called me? The landline's been out, my mother said. And you know how unreliable the cell signal is out here. Where's her phone? I demanded. I have it, she admitted. She was too attached to it. We wanted a screen-free weekend. I didn't stick around to listen to more of their explanations. I marched toward the guest room, my family trailing behind me with continued justifications, insisting I was overreacting. But the moment I reached the doorway, I froze. Grace was lying in bed, her face pale and tight with pain. Her right leg, elevated on pillows, was grotesquely swollen and bruised, so dark it appeared almost black. Her eyes, red and puffy, widened. When she saw me, "Mom," she whispered, tears beginning to fall again. "You came early." I rushed to her side. "What happened, baby? What did they do to you?" Through choked sobs, Grace told me about the fall, the snap she'd heard, the unbearable pain, the 3-hour walk back while sobbing, how they left her alone while they went out to dinner, how nobody listened to her or took her seriously. I examined her leg while she spoke, my horror growing with every second. Even with no medical training, I could tell something was badly wrong. This wasn't a mild injury, it was clearly serious. I turned to face them, still gathered in the doorway. "You made her walk on this? For 3 hours? And then you left her?" "We gave her painkillers," my mother said defensively. "2 ibuprofen," Grace corrected in a faint voice. "Jason said it was probably a hairline fracture," my father added, gesturing toward Jason as if his medical background made. "Everything okay?" Jason shrugged. "It didn't look that bad yesterday. Kids bounce back." I could barely contain my fury. "She needs a hospital," I said. "No need to be dramatic, Stephanie," my father replied. "If you'd let me take a look." "No." My voice was cold, flat. "You've done enough. I'm taking her to the ER." I gently lifted Grace into my arms. She felt too light, or maybe it was just adrenaline. As I carried her to the car, my family followed, spewing more excuses and suddenly volunteering to help. "Should we ride along?" my mother asked as I laid Grace gently in the back seat, supporting her leg with pillows. "No," I said, not even looking up. "You've done more than enough." The 20-minute drive to the nearest hospital felt eternal. Every bump in the road made Grace whimper. I'd called ahead, so a team was ready when we arrived. By the time we got there, she was barely able to speak from the pain. The A staff took one look at her and acted fast, rushing us into a treatment room. A warm, capable doctor, Dr. Rivera, examined her and ordered X-rays and immediate pain relief. When she came back with the results, her face was grim. "She has a displaced tibial shaft fracture," she explained, pointing to the X-ray. "You can see here the bone isn't just broken. It's shifted out of place." "What's the risk?" I asked, my throat tight. "Right now, our biggest concern is compartment syndrome, too much pressure in the muscle tissue, which can damage nerves and vessels. There's also increased risk of infection, improper healing, and long-term loss of mobility." "What do we do?" "She needs surgery," Dr. Rivera said without hesitation. "We'll realign the bone and secure it with plates and screws. Our orthopedic surgeon is on his way." I nodded, barely able to absorb it all. "If we brought her in right away." The look on Dr. Rivera's face told me everything. This didn't have to be so severe. It could have just needed a cast, but walking on it had changed everything. As they prepped Grace for surgery, I sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. The guilt and fury pressed down on me. I had trusted them with my child, and they had failed her in every possible way. An hour later, Jason and my parents appeared outside the room. But I couldn't feel anything except rage. The orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Layton, came soon after. He confirmed the diagnosis and explained the procedure: a titanium rod, screws, and intensive aftercare to protect the tissue damaged from walking on the brake. "In children, we avoid this if we can," he said. "But in this case, it's necessary." Grace looked at him, wide-eyed. "Will it hurt?" "You'll be asleep," he reassured her gently. "And we'll manage your pain very carefully. The good news is children heal fast. You'll be okay." As they wheeled her to surgery, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'll be right here when you wake up." I turned to face my family, who lingered awkwardly near the doorway. "Stephanie, don't you think you're blowing this out of proportion?" My father began. "Surgery feels like overkill. If I'd had a chance to check her properly." "Don't." I interrupted, my tone low, measured. "Just stop." We had no idea it was that serious, my mother chimed in. Grace didn't make it sound this bad? She cried for hours, I said sharply. She heard the bone crack. She told you something was broken. Kids exaggerate, Jason replied with a casual flick of his hand. Happens all the time in my office. They come in sure it's life or death, turns out to be a mild sprain. Something in me broke. This isn't some minor sprain, Jason. A displaced tibial fracture with damaged tissue. You're an orthopedic surgeon. You should have known how severe it was immediately. In a clinical setting, sure, he defended. But we were on a trail. Visibility was low. Then you should have erred on the side of caution. I was yelling now, drawing the attention of nearby nurses. I forced my voice down. You should have carried her. Called for help. Done anything other than making her hike 3 hours on a broken leg. We had dinner arrangements, my mother said weakly. I stared at her, stunned. Dinner? You left my injured daughter alone in a cabin with no phone because of dinner. The Hendersons are important to your father, she said, as if that somehow made it reasonable. More important than Grace's health? Than her safety? Now, Stephanie, my father interrupted, slipping into the same patronizing tone that had silenced me since childhood. You're being overly emotional. Doctors overreact to protect themselves. I've seen it many times. I closed my eyes, a rush of old memories resurfacing, the time I sprained my wrist at 10, and he said it was just bruised. Until the school nurse sent me for x-rays 3 days later, the time Jason shattered the neighbor's window, but I got punished because Jason wouldn't lie. The constant dismissal of my pain, the endless elevation of his. Grace could face lifelong consequences. I said quietly, she's 12. She may need months of physical therapy, because you wouldn't miss one dinner. Because you refused to believe her pain was real. She'd be all right, Jason insisted. Kids bounce back. Remember when I busted my arm falling from that oak tree? Dad said the same thing right there in the kitchen. And you were treated. Immediately, I shot back. You weren't forced to climb back down the tree with a broken limb. The room fell into stillness. A nurse approached gently. Miss Mitchell. Your daughter's in surgery now. It should last around 2 hours. We do have a private waiting room, if you'd prefer some quiet. I nodded, grateful. Thank you. As I reached for my purse to follow her, my mother stepped closer. We'll stay with you. I stopped, facing them fully, and in that second with Grace in the operating room, I saw my family with a clarity I'd never had before. These people, tied to me by blood, had shown me who they truly were. Again and again, I just hadn't wanted to see it, not until they put my child at risk. No, I said firmly. You won't. Stephanie, be reasonable, my father began. Reasonable? I echoed, letting out a cold laugh. Was it reasonable to make a child walk 3 miles with a broken leg? Was it reasonable to leave her in agony without a phone? Was it reasonable to put a dinner party above her safety? We made a judgment call, Jason defended, easy to second guess with hindsight. A judgment call? I repeated. Well, here's mine. Leave. My mother's face crumpled. But Grace will want me there when she wakes up. She doesn't need to see the people who ignored her pain who added to it. You're being dramatic, my father said coldly. As always. Maybe I am, I replied, but I'm also her mother, and right now. That means keeping her safe even from her own family, especially from her own family. Jason moved closer, his jaw tightening. You know, this exact attitude is the reason. Mark walked away. You always take things too far. The cheap shot was meant to cut deep, to shut me down like it had in the past. But this time, instead of recoiling, I felt strangely composed. Grace is undergoing emergency surgery, I said, voice steady, because you, a licensed orthopedic surgeon, chose a dinner party over properly assessing her broken leg. That's not exaggeration. That's just the truth. I held his gaze, unwavering. Now I'd like you to leave. All of you. My father's face turned red with rage. If we walk out now, don't expect us to come back. He meant it as a threat. To me, it sounded like release. I don't, I replied. They exited in a flurry of resentment, muttering about how ungrateful and unreasonable I was. But I felt no vindication, just a heavy, aching exhaustion and annoying fear for Grace. Her surgery ran almost 3 hours longer than predicted, the procedure more complicated than expected. When Dr. Layton finally returned to speak with me, his face carried cautious hope. "We've stabilized the break using a titanium rod and multiple screws," he explained. "There was quite a bit of soft tissue trauma that needed repair, but we believe we managed everything effectively. She's stable and recovering now. What's the outlook long term?" I asked. "With proper rehab and consistent follow-up, she should fully recover," he assured. "She need to avoid putting weight on that leg for at least 6 weeks, then begin a slow, structured return to normal activity. We may need to remove the hardware in a year or so, once healing is complete." I nodded, a wave of relief rushing through me. "Can I see her?" When I stepped into the recovery area, Grace was groggy, drifting in and out of consciousness. Her leg braced in a bulky splint to keep the swelling down before it could be casted. Her eyes brightened faintly at the sight of me. "Mom," she whispered, "you're still here." I gently took her hand, careful not to disturb the four. "Of course I'm here, honey. I'm not going anywhere." She looked around the sterile room, searching. "Where's Grandma and Grandpa and Uncle Jason?" I hesitated, unsure how much truth to give her in such a delicate moment. "They had to leave," I said gently. "But don't worry about that now. You just rest." Tears welled up in her eyes. "They didn't believe me, Mom. I told them how bad it was, but they said I was overreacting. Uncle Jason said I was fine." I fought to hold back my own tears. "I believe you, Grace. I always will. And I'm so sorry this happened to you." She drifted off again, her small hand still wrapped around mine. As I sat there watching her sleep, I made a quiet vow this would never happen again. No matter the cost, I would keep her safe, even if it meant cutting off the people who'd failed us both so terribly. The days that followed passed in a haze hospital routines. Medication charts, care coordination. Grace stayed admitted for 3 days. Her leg remained in a splint while the swelling reduced. I barely left her side, sleeping in the stiff recliner beside her bed, using the family showers in the hospital, and stepping out only for essential phone calls. I notified both my school and Grace's. My principal responded with understanding, especially once I explained the circumstances. Grace's teachers coordinated to send coursework and notes to help her keep up from afar. Our real support system. The chosen one, not the blood one. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, they showed up in every way that mattered. My parents and Jason, on the other hand, never visited once. Instead, I received a steady stream of messages, voicemails and texts filled with excuses, defensiveness, and blame shifting. My mother said they were giving us space. My father accused the doctors of being overly cautious. Jason even had the nerve to suggest that Grace would have recovered more easily if I hadn't taken her to the AA so quickly, if I'd just let him handle it. I read each message with a growing sense of detachment. They felt like echoes from a version of my life that no longer existed. Each word only affirmed what I already knew. Asking them to leave was the right call. The only one who reached out with true concern was Aunt Eleanor, my father's sister. They'd been estranged for years, a rift I now understood more than ever. When she called, somehow having heard about Grace, her first words were simple and genuine. "What can I do to help?" Eleanor lived nearly 3 hours away, but she didn't hesitate to offer to come that weekend. "I can't say I'm shocked Harold and Martha messed this up," she said flatly. "They acted the same way when you cracked your collarbone at soccer camp. Told you to shake it off for 2 days until your coach demanded an x-ray." That memory had faded, buried under years of being similarly dismissed. "I used to think that was just how families were," I said quietly, "that all parents downplayed things like that." "It's not normal," Eleanor replied.
It's
Neglect, clear and simple. When Grace was finally discharged and we brought her home, the challenges only changed shape. The apartment on the 3rd floor of a walk-up suddenly felt like a mountain. Grace couldn't put a single ounce of pressure on her right leg for 6 weeks minimum, meaning even the most basic movement required crutches. That first night was exhausting. I helped her bathe, get dressed, and settle into bed. As I tucked She asked the one question I'd been avoiding. Will we ever see Grandma or Grandpa again? Or Uncle Jason? I sat beside her, carefully weighing my words. I don't know, honey. What they did making you walk on a broken leg, leaving you alone in pain, that wasn't okay. It wasn't safe, Grace nodded slowly. I kept wishing. You were there. You would have believed me. You would have taken me to the doctor right away. Always, I promised her. I'll always believe you when you say something's wrong. And I'll always make sure you get the help you need. She paused, then whispered, Grandpa said I was just being dramatic. Like you. Is that bad? Her words crushed something inside me. Grace, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. Your leg was broken badly. The doctors said so. You weren't dramatic. And if being like me means standing up for what's right, caring deeply, and never ignoring someone's pain, then that's something to be proud of. It's the best compliment you could give me. She seemed to take that in, but her eyes still carried a shadow, not just from physical pain, but the deeper sting of being let down by people she trusted. The road ahead was anything but smooth. Our insurance covered most of the hospital stay and procedure, but the co-pays deductible and future physical therapy sessions stretched our finances tight. I applied for medical leave from work, but it only covered part of my income. Melissa, my friend and fellow teacher, set up a meal train. Tom, a neighbor and colleague, offered to carry Grace up and down the stairs whenever needed. Mark, my ex-husband, called from Seattle, shocked and horrified by what had happened.
He arranged for grocery deliveries each week, talking to Mark.
About my family was difficult.
He'd always liked them, thought my complaints were exaggerated.
But now, with everything laid bare, he fell silent. Jesus, Steph, he said finally. I thought you were just sensitive. I had no idea they were actually like this. Neither did I admitted. Not to this degree. Do you want me to come out there?
He asked. I can take time off if you need me.
The offer surprised me. Since the divorce, Mark hadn't taken time off for anything. No, but thank you. We've got it handled. Maybe just FaceTime her more often. She could use the extra support. Absolutely, he said. Whatever she needs. Then he hesitated. What about your parents? What are you planning to do about them? It was the question that haunted me. What do you do when the people who are supposed to love and protect you instead cause harm? How do you balance blood ties with your duty to keep your child safe? I'm not sure, I told him. But I know this. I won't let them hurt her again. After the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I started searching grandparent medical neglect, estrangement from toxic parents. There were pages of results. But one link caught my eye, a support group for adults estranged from family. I joined that night. Later, I consulted with Patricia Reyes, a family lawyer specializing in child welfare. I laid out everything: Grace's charts, the discharge paperwork, the texts from my parents and Jason. This falls under medical neglect, she said firmly. As her mother, you have the full legal right to cut off their contact. And if necessary, you could even request a restraining order based on the harm they caused. I don't think it'll come to that, I replied. They'll probably just write me off and disappear. But I want to know my options, she nodded. Then keep everything. Save every message. Document Grace's medical treatments, therapy sessions, and your communication. If they try to interfere with your decisions later, you'll have evidence. As Grace settled into the long road of recovery, the weight of it all grew heavier. Even simple tasks like getting to school or taking a shower became complex. She adapted quickly to the crutches, her arms getting stronger by the day. But the emotional scars weren't so easy to gauge. The nightmares began soon after Grace, dreaming of falling, of being left alone deep in the woods. She grew tense whenever I was out of view for too long. When my mother sent a bright, chirpy "get well soon" card, completely ignoring what had actually happened, Grace just stared at it for a long while. Then she quietly asked, "Can you throw this away?" They don't think they did anything wrong, do they? She asked. No, sweetheart, I said. They don't. Some people really struggle to admit when they've done harm. She considered that for a moment and then said, I don't want to be like that. I want to be able to say I'm sorry when I've hurt someone. And in that moment, despite the pain, the stress, the grief, I realized something. Grace was learning deep, important things. About owning your mistakes, about empathy, about self-respect. Things my parents had never, in their entire lives, come close to grasping. As the days passed, the messages from my parents and Jason became crueler, more aggressive. They accused me of manipulating Grace, of overreacting, of being an ungrateful daughter after everything they'd supposedly done for me. Not once did any of them acknowledge the seriousness of her injury, or offer any true apology. It took me several days after bringing Grace home to make my decision, not out of rage or impulse, but out of clarity. Years of repeated evidence had finally solidified. My family had shown me again and again who they were. It was time I believed them. One morning, while Grace napped after physical therapy, I sat at our kitchen table with a legal pad, her medical documents, and a strange, steady calm. Her temporary splint had been replaced with a cast sky blue. Her pick and already decorated with signatures from a handful of close visitors, I began writing not a rant, not a dramatic farewell, but a composed, factual summary of events. I outlined what had happened and what boundaries would be enforced going forward. I attached Grace's x-rays and surgical report, highlighting key diagnoses: displaced tibial fracture, soft tissue trauma from weight-bearing stress, medical care delayed with risk of complications. To my parents I wrote, Harold and Martha, attached are Grace's medical records. I want you to fully understand the severity of her injury and the consequences of the decisions made under your care last weekend. As her mother, I entrusted you with her safety. That trust is now broken beyond repair. Grace faces months of physical rehabilitation and may require further procedures. She has lost her soccer season and potentially next year's start. She endured needless pain that could have been avoided with even minimal compassion or attention. After long reflection, I've chosen to permanently sever our relationship. This is not a cooling off period, and it is not an emotional outburst. It is a conscious act of protection for both myself and Grace. Effective immediately. Do not attempt to contact Grace in any form. Do not contact me outside legal channels. Do not come to our home or her school. Do not use relatives as messengers. Violation of these boundaries will result in immediate legal action. I do not make this choice lightly. It follows years of being dismissed, gaslit, and emotionally manipulated. I tolerated it for too long, believing that family meant something sacred. But Grace's broken bones shattered that illusion. 2. Stephanie Jason's letter carried a similar tone, though I added something specific to him. As a licensed healthcare provider, your failure to assess Grace's obvious injury is appalling. You prioritized dinner reservations over a suffering child. Your credentials may remain intact, but your actions revealed a fundamental lack of integrity that no degree can excuse. I mailed the letters via certified post, ensuring proof of receipt. Patricia, my attorney, received copies. I also changed our phone numbers and emails, distributing the new ones only to close friends and trusted contacts. Grace stood beside me as I dropped the envelopes into the mailbox outside our apartment. Her expression was serious, far too grown-up. Is this forever? She asked quietly, as we made our slow way upstairs, she with her crutches, me holding her backpack. I don't know, I answered truthfully. Right now we need distance to heal, physically for you. Emotionally for both of us. Maybe one day, if they understand what they did and take true responsibility, things could be different. But that would require change they've never shown themselves capable of. Grace nodded slowly. I feel kind of sad, but also kind of lighter. Is that bad? Not at all, I said. That's exactly how I feel too. The fallout came quickly and predictably. My father's attorney contacted Patricia, lacing his letter with vague insinuations about my mental state and accusations of parental alienation. My mother left a weepy voicemail at my workplace, the only number. She still had pleading for just 1 minute to speak with Grace. Jason somehow found my new email and sent a venomous message, calling my actions slanderous and hinting at legal retaliation. Not a single one of them expressed any regret. Not a single one apologized. Patricia responded swiftly, attaching Grace's full medical records and written statements from her doctors about the consequences of the delayed care. The threats dwindled after that, though occasional guilt-tripping messages still leaked through. Meanwhile, Grace pushed forward. Recovery came in steps, slow but steady. From zero weight-bearing, she moved to partial support with a boot. Physical therapy 3 times a week built her strength. Physical therapy. But her therapist, Diane, also worked gently on her emotional healing, helping her process the betrayal. Not just the fracture. Eleanor became a steady presence. Every other weekend she drove in with groceries or just to sit and talk. She kept me company while Grace rested and, in time, revealed more of the family history I'd never been told, patterns passed down like heirlooms. Your grandfather did the same to your dad, she said one night over chamomile tea. Downplayed his injuries. Taught him to bury emotion. Favored the son who never cried. So Harold became what he was raised to be, I said softly. She nodded. That explains it, she said, but it doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed, it never will. Just because you understand where a behavior comes from doesn't mean you have to keep tolerating it. As the weeks moved on, Grace and, I began building new routines, ones that were ours alone. Sunday mornings turned into pancake feasts, topped with whatever we felt like, berries, chocolate chips, even whipped cream straight from the can. Friday nights became our movie marathons, with takeout from nearby places we'd never tried before. We launched a tiny 2-person book club, reading the same novels and chatting about them over mugs of hot cocoa. In the place of the family we distanced ourselves from. We leaned into the people who stood by us consistently. My colleagues stepped up to cover my classes when Grace had doctor visits. Neighbors pitched in, helping us with groceries, lifting things, even navigating stairs. And then there was Mark. He flew in for a surprise weekend visit to check on Grace, yes, but also to help fix up little things around the apartment that I'd been ignoring. 3 months after her operation, Grace returned to school full-time. She was still a bit limited in movement, but the walking boot gave her more freedom. Her friends had stayed connected during her recovery, bringing class notes, silly stories, and snacks. Her teachers were accommodating without making her feel different. Everyone made space for her to heal and rejoin life on her own terms. I also found solace in a support group for adults estranged from their parents. Listening to others helped me make sense of my own past, the jabs masked as helpful advice, the emotional invalidation, the roles Jason and I had been shoved into. I had always been the scapegoat. He had always been the favored one. Cutting them off wasn't revenge. It was survival. 6 months after the injury, Grace had a second surgery to remove the internal hardware. It was simpler with quicker healing, just as Dr. Layton had told us. By that time, we hadn't heard a word from my parents or Jason in almost 3 months. Occasionally, someone from the old network would mention that they were telling people a warped version of the story, one where they were the victims, and I was the unstable, dramatic daughter. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. The evidence lived in Grace's medical files, in the tiny scar still visible on her leg, in the therapy she was still undergoing. It lived in the peace of our daily routines, in the absence of relentless judgment or conditional affection. The day she was medically cleared to resume all normal activities, including soccer, felt momentous. We celebrated with dinner at her favorite restaurant. As we lingered over dessert, she studied me with a thoughtful look. Mom, she said slowly, I've been thinking about Grandma and Grandpa, and Uncle Jason. My stomach clenched. What about them, sweetheart? I don't miss them as much as I thought I would, she said, swirling her spoon through the chocolate drizzle. Is that bad? Not even a little bit, I told her. The people in your life should fill you up, not empty you. That's true, even if they're family, she nodded. I miss what I wanted them to be. Like grandparents who cheer at school plays or an uncle who teaches me stuff. But they weren't like that. They made me feel small. Like I didn't count. They made me feel like that too, I confessed. For most of my life, Grace gave a slow, knowing nod. I'm glad we don't feel that way anymore. That evening, walking home side by side, Grace, striding with full strength, no crutches, No limp. I realized something. We'd both healed in ways far beyond her physical injury. We had redefined what it meant to be safe, to be valued, to be a family. The trauma had been devastating, but it had also opened a door. And through that door, we had stepped into something stronger, steadier, and finally real. Half a year after her fracture, our lives had shifted into a new rhythm. Grace was doing incredibly well physically, just as the doctor had predicted. The second surgery had left behind only a faint mark, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. She was back on the soccer field. Her coach reintroduced her, gently with lighter drills until she was ready to fully join practices again. Emotionally, though, the healing took longer. Grace still had the occasional nightmare dreams of being abandoned, of lying hurt and alone. Sometimes a voice, a scent, or even the clack of Scrabble tiles would bring it all flooding back. But therapy was helping, and time was doing its work. For me, the process meant peeling away years of internal programming learning, not just to see the harm, but to stop excusing it. I caught myself bracing for judgment that never arrived, defending my choices even when no one challenged them, saying, "Sorry for simply existing in spaces where I belonged." Undoing these patterns took intention and relentless self-reflection. Though my parents had pulled back, they hadn't disappeared. Every few weeks, a card would show up for Grace, cheerful, superficial, not a single word about what had happened. Each was signed, "With love, Grandma and Grandpa." I gave Grace the choice, open them or not. Most of the time she left them sealed. "They still don't understand, do they?" she said one day, holding an untouched birthday card. "They really think pretending it never happened makes it go away." "Some people never learn how to truly admit when they've hurt someone," I told her. "Owning it would shatter the way they see themselves." "That's really sad," Grace said, and the empathy in her voice stunned me. It must be lonely never being able to say you're sorry. Jason, meanwhile, had apparently moved on without a backward glance. According to Aunt Eleanor, he told the extended family I was unstable and had cut everyone off with no explanation. Most didn't buy it, especially once Eleanor quietly filled them in on the truth. But honestly, his lies no longer mattered. The fact that he couldn't take responsibility for how he'd hurt Grace just confirmed that we were better without him. The only persistent outreach came from my mother. She sent messages through mutual friends, wrote letters to my school, even approached Grace's soccer coach at a game who, thankfully, knew the situation and firmly kept her away. Her messages always followed the same formula. She missed us. She loved us, and couldn't understand why I was being so extreme. She begged us to move past this unfortunate chapter. But never once did she admit what they'd done. Never once did she say, "I'm sorry." I upheld the boundaries I'd drawn. The legal letters had served their purpose. They stopped coming to our home. They didn't contact Grace directly. But the emotional manipulation persisted, my parents casting themselves as wounded, baffled victims to anyone who'd listen, through the support group for adults estranged from toxic parents. I discovered this was common, what some called the missing reasons. My parents genuinely couldn't grasp why I'd gone no contact. Because facing the truth would mean admitting they hurt their own child. And that didn't fit the story they told themselves. Understanding that didn't make it hurt less. But it helped me stop waiting for an apology that would never arrive. I let go of the fantasy, the tearful breakthrough, the dramatic apology. The family reunion movies love to sell us. Instead, I focused on a life where that closure wasn't needed for joy. Grace and I built new traditions. In place of forced, tense holidays at my parents' lake house, we invited close friends for warm, intimate dinners at our apartment. On Thanksgiving, we volunteered at a local shelter, then shared our meal with Melissa's family. Christmas became just as peaceful, simple, joyful. After Grace had healed enough, we started a new tradition, a trip to a nearby ski resort. Aunt Eleanor stayed, the one family member who truly showed up. She visited often, bringing stories about our ancestors that helped both me and Grace see the bigger picture, the patterns passed down, the choices we could break. Through her, Grace felt rooted in family history, without being tangled in the toxicity. One surprise in all of this was Mark. Our divorce had been civil but distant. He chased his career out of state while I raised Grace alone. But after everything happened with my parents, he stepped up. He called Grace more often. He visited. He helped with medical bills without me asking. Beyond child support, I should have been more present, he said one afternoon. Watching your parents abandon Grace, it made me realize I wasn't really showing up either. Just in a different way. His honesty was striking. So different from my parents' blame and denial. No, it wasn't romantic. We made better co-parents than we ever had as partners. But still, it was a healing, one that mattered, and Grace. She astounded me every single day. Her recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional, mental, spiritual. She faced pain with grit, talked through her feelings without hiding from them. One evening, as we walked our neighbor's dog, part of her strength-building routine, she looked up at me and said, "You know what's weird, Mom? I feel like I learned more from them being gone than I ever did when they were here." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I learned who I don't want to be. Someone who can't admit when they're wrong. Someone who cares more about looking perfect than being kind. Someone who shrinks people to feel tall." I stopped walking. Her clarity, her wisdom left me speechless. "That's a powerful insight, Grace. And also," she added, casually but with weight, "I learned that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time." I smiled. Maya Angelou. She was right. Grace nodded. That became the final, deepest truth to emerge from all of this. My parents and brother had shown me who they were over and over. And I had ignored it, explained it away, twisted myself into knots trying to earn the love they withheld. It took them turning their backs on my daughter for me to finally stop justifying their behavior and accept the truth. Family isn't blood. It's love, it's respect, it's safety. And sometimes, the healthiest family is the one you choose, the one you build with intention. Drawing boundaries, even lifelong ones, with toxic relatives isn't cruelty. It's protection.
Especially when a child is involved, Grace will always
carry a small scar from that weekend. A faint line where her bone was repaired. But emotionally, she's healing more beautifully than I could have dreamed because we didn't hide the pain. We faced it, we named it. We left the people who caused it behind. As for me, I no longer carry guilt for the estrangement. I no longer second-guess myself in the middle of the night, wondering if I was too sensitive or too harsh. I know the truth of what happened. And I know that standing between Grace and further harm was the only choice that mattered. Some relationships can't be mended because the people who broke them refuse to acknowledge the damage. Some things are broken for a reason. Real healing doesn't come from forcing shattered pieces back together. It comes from choosing what's still whole and building something entirely new. Something stronger. Something real. Have you ever had to make a painful choice to protect someone or yourself? Where did your courage come from? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this resonated, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder. Walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest thing you can do. Thank you for being here.